Hey people, we're back with more the Metaverse Asia Podcast, and I'm super glad because today we have James McQueen who's coming on to the program, and I'm super excited because I think the last time I spoke to him was on a WhatsApp call. I think that was during in the midst of the Euro 2020, and I think England just qualified or just beat Germany, I think. So, well, the Euros are over, and we all, how not super, 100% happy how it went, but I think it's great to come back to podcasting, and I'm back this week with more live podcast shows, and he will be my first guest this week, and we have a couple of guests coming on this particular week. So a very short intro for Gary. He is someone that has been in the industry, in the fashion industry for quite a while, and we all know that the gaming and art industries have gone increasingly virtual over the past decades. And the fashion industry is next, and you will need to rethink how it engages with creators and embraces user-generated content in the metaverse. So what role does our next podcast guest, artist and designer Gary McQueen, who is inspired by his late uncle Alexander McQueen, think user-generated content will play in the metaverse? I also get to ask him a load of other questions, so I can't be even more excited to have him on in a podcast studio right now. So let's see whether he's on the screen. Hi Gary, how are you doing today, my friend?
Oh yeah, pretty good. It's a nice day, weather's good. Yeah, can't complain. Getting over the England game as you mentioned. So
did you watch that game? I'm not sure whether you're like a football mad person like me. Are you a football fan?
Only for the World Cups and things like that, I get quite patriotic, that kind of thing. But I don't follow any particular team, just England, I guess. But, I was pleased with the Italian team. They played really well, so fair game to them.
Yeah, congratulations to Italy, of course, but commiserations to the England team. But we are super happy, how it has gone in terms of like they have exceeded expectations from many people by going all the way to the final, right? So today we're not going to be talking about football because I think we are going to pick your brains and basically, borrow your wisdom when it comes to, the future of fashion industry and how you actually pan out in the metaverse. So maybe my first question for you is the same question that I always ask all my favorite podcast guests, which is basically to ask you to maybe tell us your story for the next 3 minutes, how you got started and how has the journey been so far for you?
Yeah. Where do I start? Well, I've always been quite artistic from a young age. So I've always had a love of creating worlds, creating my own characters, even from the age of 5. So I used to draw from horror films and things like that and just invent my own characters and worlds that they lived in, really. And that was really an early introduction by my uncle, Alexander McQueen, when he used to babysit me. And we used to watch the horror films together, and we both used to draw. He used to sketch from those as well. And you can also see that influence in some of his shows and the names of those shows, where he's grabbed the names from those films, that we used to watch. I've always been quite artistic. I never really knew what to do with it, but I studied graphic design, where I was introduced to the software like Photoshop, very clean typography kind of design. It didn't really fit into what I wanted to really achieve in terms of expression. So I never really found a place within the graphic design industry where I could really flourish. But I did, again, it was just a skill to my belt, really, that I developed. And then I started working in a publishing company where I learned a whole range of things on a very minimum wage. So I was doing all like the print process, page layout, using Quark Express back in the day, which is now in design. They use now for that sort of thing. Preparing files for the printers, making sure everything was really high quality, all that kind of stuff, like the technical stuff, And then I stayed there for about 3 years, and then that company went into liquidation. So I was out of work, and then the position came open at Alexander McQueen, and I got a call from my uncle Lee for a textile designer on menswear that I was looking for. And because Alexander McQueen used a lot of digital textiles and techniques within their print process, I fit in quite well with what I've learned from the graphic design section, And then really, I didn't have a clue about fashion and how it worked, and I'd never studied it at all, but I quickly learned to adapt my artistic skills and applying that to, pattern pieces, garment pattern pieces, different techniques, whether it's like woven, printed artworks, just different ways of translating that artwork into tangible fabrics. And then I ended up staying for about 7 years. So that's about 14 seasons. And found my way in the fashion industry that way, So yeah,
this is a brilliant journey. It's a fantastic journey. And, it's great to hear that many great artists, right? They always start out by being really savvy in Photoshop. I think that's what I find very in common in terms of the art people, right? The designers, they always use that tool is their go-to tool, of course. Just like how, marketers, how they started is always from journalism, by interviewing people. So it's great to hear your story. And of course, we want to pick up when it comes to the future of fashion. And before, we walk through your brilliant AR, VR showroom experience, which is on your GaryJamesMcQueen.com website. Maybe could we get your thoughts, tell us, about in terms of how should fashion brands actually rethink their approach to user-generated content and new creators?
Yeah. I think, this new way forward with the digital industry in terms of fashion, I think it's really, it is obviously quite a new thing, and it's something that isn't quite introduced yet into the education system. When I created my show, I was fortunate enough to get an Epic Mega grant actually to allow me to do this fashion show. We probably should start there, and we pitched to Epic Games during lockdown actually. And it was only due to my understanding of both the digital world and also the traditional fashion world that I fitted the criteria of, developing a kind of pipeline, I guess, of how those two worlds can kind of coexist to create, a way forward, I guess. There's lots of elements within that pipeline that I feel can, really benefit the sustainability aspect of traditional fashion in terms of development of fabrics, through to, photo shoots and things like that as well, using digital garments. So, I discovered a lot along the way. It was the first time I'd actually put a full collection together myself, and also done that in the digital space. And what I tried to do was, create something that was quite diverse. So there's a balance of men's and women's wear within the show, and it's also lifestyle orientated, quite sporty. But then there's also some couture pieces like the one you're showing at the moment. And what I didn't want to do was, obviously, I could have gone really far removed from reality as well. So I could have gone totally into that digital world where you can create things that wouldn't exist within the traditional fashion world. But for me, it's important to not have such a big gap when trying to show how these two worlds can work together realistically. So if I'm developing digital fabrics, I wanted it to be conceivable within that traditional world that you don't have to create things that are totally not possible. You can balance the two as well, and find a working pipeline for the traditional fashion world.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head when it comes to how all these experiences. It's really the sky's the limit, right? There's so many possibilities that can be generated. And I was just looking at your website earlier and your virtual showroom, like getting goosebumps already. Like how, in terms of like all this creativity can be expressed in so many different forms in this day and age. So you mentioned about the Unreal, grant, right? Maybe tell us about your thoughts on the Unreal Engine and of course Epic Games as well that recently featured your digital fashion show on the Epic Spotlight. Tell us how it all came about and how was the entire experience?
Yeah, I mean, I had to kind of split myself in between two ways of thinking and working. Obviously, as I mentioned before, there was the traditional fashion route, which, in a sense, everything really started through that traditional route when it came to developing the collection. I worked with a traditional pattern cutter to create traditional patterns, so especially on some more tailored pieces to make sure that they fitted properly. And this comes back to the educational thing that I was kind of highlighting earlier, that you've got a lot of digital pattern cutters, but they haven't necessarily got the traditional pattern cutting skills of a traditional pattern cutter that are required to get something to fit nicely. So that is something that I was very considerate of. But partly, it was also created digitally, the patterns as well. So some of the pieces were totally created digitally as well. All the clothes actually did not exist at all. So everything that you see in that catwalk doesn't exist physically. So again, it's that sustainability aspect of creating something that doesn't exist and doesn't require resources in that aspect, So that's one side of it. You got all that development side of the collection, with sketches and then technical sketches based upon my initial ideas of what the clothes are and the characters, which are the models. But then you've also got the set concept that I had to come up with, and the whole story, the way that it flows, So I was also a film director in one sense of storyboarding. The music was very important as well within the show, the flow of the music and how that worked with the rhythm of the show, if you like, So there's a kind of build of energy, and it was really important to secure that piece, which we had to go for a record company to get a record label. And there's a piece by Tio, who I love. I love his music because he's got a really good way of balancing sort of natural tribal sounds with this kind of futuristic kind of house music. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but and when I'm building a show like this, the inspirations, I like to combine a lot of different inspirations to create new ideas. So for me, it's got this kind of ancient Babylonian feel, but then it's also got this kind of futuristic sort of Stargate feel as well, which is what I was trying to get across. And the tower itself, the tower itself makes up 50% of the set, so that required really tight choreography. And when it comes to the design of the set, I wanted to create a tower that was still impressive, but not so large that the models wouldn't make it down to the bottom of the tower before the end of the show. So all these things have to be thought about carefully,
Yeah, and before we talk about all this real-time rendering and the art direction, I am a big fan of what you just mentioned, which is the importance of music, right? And I remember, one of the musicians that I think who is based in perhaps in the UK or it could be in Germany right now. He was on my show probably a year ago, and he mentioned how he actually helped with the music design for your uncle Alexander McQueen. I think. Back during the day. And of course, one of the important elements of any digital fashion show, right, or even the in-person fashion show, the music actually helps to drive that adrenaline and elevates the design. So it's something that I noticed from your video. Unfortunately, we're not playing the audio because I want to hear you speak more. So I understand when I was just admiring this piece of art that you've created, this digital fashion show, the music is incredible as the visuals that we're seeing right now and screen sharing. Tell us, how important it is that to have all these great tech companies now that are bringing about all these possibilities of real-time rendering, and you're able to create animations and even set up the cameras afterwards, right? Which is something that we can see, you have done it really brilliantly. Actually having more freedom now of creativity in terms of the directions of that.
Yeah. I mean, when you're a designer, it's really important to be able to sort of translate a story you know, which for me, like you rightly mentioned, for me, this becomes like a piece of art. You know, it's like it transcends fashion. You know, it goes into film work, it goes into music, it goes into art. You know, the whole thing really is art. You know, the way that I bring the music, the feel, the concepts, the looks, everything. It's not just about clothes. You know, it's about creating an idea. So you know, that's really important when you start going about creating something like this from scratch. When it comes to real-time rendering, so basically, you know, what we had to do was create individual animations, and we used Marvelous Designer for that. And then those animations are then set into Unreal Engine. They just play on a kind of loop, if you like. And then from there, you've got that freedom to set up your art direction on the cameras, choosing whichever angles you like. You know, you can set up the lighting. The light actually changes 4 times throughout the show, so that made it a little bit more complicated. You know, it wasn't one consistent color. For me, you had to go through from dawn through to evening. You know, going through this kind of transition, which you know, it can cause some. Not issues, but stuff needs to work through in a way that reflects on the clothes themselves, you know, and how that reacts with the materials. Again, a lot of the materials used in this were metallic, so there's a lot of specularity going on, which you've got to take into consideration, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think, does that answer the question? I was going to mention something else actually. I've just totally forgot what I was going to talk about, but I've spoken myself into a corner.
You bring back your train of thought later on, but I have to say,
Yeah,
you know,
there's so much that goes
looking
into
at all
it.
these visuals, yeah, it seems that your partner Unreal Engine, they have really bridged that immersive storytelling ideas and all these evocative shots that you were seeing in your head, right? Like all these
Yeah,
open desert scenes and all these mysterious sun goddess to all this secluded Babylonian structure. It seems to give the
yeah,
show lost in time. Phil, tell us more how all these Unreal Engine cameras and guiding like you know, could be placed wherever you wanted them, and it allows you to do like even strategic close-ups on the fabrics. And this is a move that actually make pieces like all these
yeah,
serpentine body suits and the bloodlines coat really pop, right?
yeah. I mean, part of the pipeline that I developed, and this comes back to my knowledge of understanding the 3D world, because I actually use 3D software such as ZBrush, where I started using ZBrush probably about 10 years ago, and primarily for the use of creating textiles. So I would actually sculpt whatever the pattern was, whatever the concept was, would be 3D sculpted in that software. And then I would produce a 2D render in, say, Keyshot, and that would become a print. But I really understood what the benefits of using that software would be, because you can then reuse stuff, you know, and it would look totally different depending on the materials, the lighting you use when you render that. And then you can also 3D print it as well, you know. So if you want to create a whole capsule, you know, collection surrounding one idea, you could create, say, a scarf that's been printed from one artwork, but then you could also create jewelry, you know, 3D printed from the same concept. So yeah, for me, it's very important to have something that's got more depth to it, and a very considered story behind it that branches out. It could be something like the film here that we're watching, or it could be art pieces that kind of split off from that, you know, jewelry pieces. So for me, it's about creating larger worlds which give it authenticity, you know, and something for people to believe in.
100%. And we really appreciate that you have already walked us through the process of creating all these hot cinematics using all these tools like a Marvelous Designer, and
Yeah.
you could even add materials and textures with Substance Painter,
Well,
right?
yeah.
You
I'll,
mentioned what
I'll,
you've done with ZBrush as well, yeah.
Yeah, I went off point a little bit because I was actually going to talk about Substance Designer there for the textiles, and then I went into ZBrush. But yeah, part of the pipeline was using Substance Designer as well, which is quite a more sophisticated way of producing the textiles. You know, you can really get some really high complex fabrics through simple black and white alphas, say, using the node system within Substance Design. All you need is a black and white alpha, and from that you can create something really quite spectacular, so that's the route we chose to use. And then it was a case of being able to get those textures into those maps into Unreal Engine and make them work in the same way, So we had to use neutral lighting as well when we were setting that up. So we had a good understanding what it looked like in its neutral situation, that fabric. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, the lighting was quite extreme within the show, so that would affect it slightly as well. So we had to take that into consideration,
I think what we're seeing here is something really incredible. You have raised the game in terms of like how digital fashion shows should be presented. And does it mean that creative directors around the world, they also need to raise their game, or are there going to be like easier tools to use? Like you mentioned Substance Painter, Marvelous Designer, ZBrush, right? Are there like more tools like MetaHuman Creator that will help them to reduce this heavy lifting?
I think at the moment, I'm in a very unique position because I've got an understanding of both worlds, but most traditional designers don't have that luxury of understanding the 3D world of what software they should be using. They would probably have to go through consultancy, and rely on external companies, third parties, and through that process, I think you can really lose your your creative what's the word? Words failing me at the moment. Well, create control, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Over the process. Whereas with myself, if I knew exactly what I wanted to achieve, and I knew what kind of software that I'd want to use to achieve that, just through my knowledge. And again, that goes back to setting up the artworks and, knowing that Unreal Engine was the software to use to create this massive set, if you like, and knowing what the possibilities are with the real-time rendering and having that freedom afterwards. And again, going back to traditional sets for fashion shows, these sets cost a lot of money to set up for like a 20-minute show with a lot of waste materials. And in the metaverse, you don't have that issue. You can reuse things and there's no waste. So, there's only benefits in my mind.
100%. Maybe talk to us about why it is important to also have the right fashion model, right? That when casting for motion capture, and it's actually more character than fashion driven in your shows, right? It seems that you translate the right personality to the avatar to actually bring that character to life in your digital fashion shows.
Yeah, I mean, this comes back to a little bit of influence of my uncle, where his shows were very character driven or personality driven, depending on what the show was about, that look, and for me that's always been very important as well. For me, it's always been more about creating worlds than about the clothes. For me, it's about telling stories as well, and it always has been. When I first launched my brand, I launched with a range of scarves, but for me it's so important to have that depth of that story. The first thing that I would actually work on is the photo shoot, the concept of the photo shoot and the campaign behind it and the story that I'm trying to tell. And then the print would kind of bounce off that, the artwork for the product would bounce off that, and then they would come together at the end, So I always split myself between being a storyteller and an artist and, and a product, I guess. So for this show, the characters were quite important, the statues are kind of generic, but I wanted something that felt quite strong and quite powerful and almost robotic, but not, and then the main character at the beginning, the sun goddess, had her own choreography to do as well. So when we was casting, it was important to get, I didn't really want a traditional looking catwalk model, you know, the way she walks. It was more about somebody who can get into character a little bit and portray those roles, you know. So we cast a male and a female model from in Holland. Actually, I did it over Zoom because I worked with a company called Metaverse Media. Actually, brought this together for me as I directed them and created the collection. They were the company that used Unreal Engine to translate my ideas upon my direction, if you like. And they also did the mocap capture as well with the models. So I was looking in over Zoom, trying to direct as best I could during lockdown. But I think we managed to get some good data to use.
This is really insightful, and I love that bit when you talk about how important storytelling is in all the shows that you do, right? I think it was someone who is outside of the fashion industry, someone in the tech industry who actually mentioned about the importance of storytelling. Is actually the most powerful person in the world, right? He's actually the storyteller, and this storyteller, like you know, sets the vision, the values and agenda of an entire generation that is to come. I think Steve Jobs is the one that will come up with a fantastic quote. But I think what you just mentioned really nailed it in the head as well. How you're able to harness, you know, all this tech advancement in terms of all this, you know, real-time rendering and ability to use different tools to actually bring your fashion show to life. So that brings to me, you know, to maybe ask you the next question. It's a more business-oriented question. Yeah, why do you think that this mix of digital fashion and cinematic 3D offers more than just a business opportunity?
Again, I guess this comes back to the NFT market that's emerging and all that stuff. I think it goes beyond obviously just fashion and stuff like that as well. This relates to, you know, Generation Z, who identify with their avatars in gaming. So it's more about self-expression going forwards, I think, and almost living a second life through this, like a digital persona. If you look at like the Fortnite market, that's a multi-billion-dollar market, you know, where, you know, we've got millennials that just spend lots and lots of their parents' money on dressing up their digital avatars. It's not just the clothes, it's their appearance and the way they look, you know. I can see this really sort of trickling down into more mainstream avatars for, you know, social events, maybe just the way that we communicate, a new form of emoji in some sense, you know. I don't know, but we don't know where it's going to end up yet. But I know there's definitely more to it than just the clothes themselves. It's more about self-expression and self-identifying, so you can be whatever you want to be. Possibly living, you know, a secondary life through these metaverses eventually. And I've been saying this a lot lately, but we don't know where it's going to end up, and it might you know, cure the problems to immortality eventually. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head again. I think it wasn't too long ago I had a podcast guest who appeared on this show, right? Not you know, in person. He actually appeared as his avatar. He actually bought a CryptoPunk for 40 ETH. That's, I think, over $40,000, right? And he was wearing his avatar when doing this interview, and it's something that, you know, that we'll probably see more and more, because our digital twin, right, you know, might want to be represented in other forms, or we want to present another, you know, where we are able to not just, you know, always appear in real life like this, and it could be something that we are wearing. And that's where, you know, all these designs that you're doing really integral part of the metaverse, and what's making this metaverse really exciting.
That's where I'd like to see it go, you know. Like if we're doing a podcast like this, that I could be like an avatar sitting here, if you know what I mean. And for me, that's very exciting. I watched like a documentary. I can't remember what it's called now. It's about the theory of us living in a holographic universe already as humans, you know. And that's something that sort of really sort of makes you think, you know, if we get into this kind of level of advancement where we're starting to create our own worlds and we're almost becoming our own gods, you know, we don't know if higher civilizations already done that, and we're actually part of their game. So, it's just a really interesting concept.
100%. I think it's not to escape from reality. Of course, we still love real life. It adds to life. Yeah, it's not something that actually makes people just switch off. It basically brings about so many new creativity forms. So we definitely want to ask you more in terms of like you mentioned about fabrics, right? And I'm looking at your virtual showroom and the ability you see something that you like and just go to the e-commerce site and make a purchase right away. This is just so seamless and convenient. So why do you think that, like even fabrics that present in this form, right, that wouldn't exist in reality, or like other things that you're not able to achieve in real world fashion, it now makes it so much more convenient and easier to like create a digital space of your own desires. So this question probably, doesn't just apply to the fashion world, but across all the niche and industries as well, right? Any business, this is actually, horizontal technology. You can actually create a digital space of your own desires.
Exactly. I mean, again, this comes back to that sustainability again, because you can actually create products, it doesn't have to be just clothes like you can see here. It could be anything, for automotive industry, anything really, where you want to kind of test the market and see what could sell potentially, what's getting the interest commercially, and then run production based on the analytics of that, So, that's just one aspect to it. Again, none of this stuff has been created physically yet. And having that e-commerce platform, again, that virtual showroom was created by Myosa Media, who are, experts in creating these seamless experiences for virtual showrooms, based on my direction, obviously. So it fitted into the story of, like you're almost inside the tower post-show, just to let people step into that world a bit more, and get absorbed within that. So alongside the clothes on that ground floor inside my virtual showroom, there's also three other floors where I've got artworks, I've got the sponsors and things like that, a bit of the behind the scenes, the mood boarding, my process in creating the show as well now, which is, there's a demand there as well with social media that it's a bit more transparent, the whole industry, and I've always felt really strongly about inclusivity, especially within the fashion industry that has had its doors quite firmly shut, but for me it's important to sort of invite people into that world and open up opportunities for people like myself who didn't necessarily study that industry, but were given the opportunity to come into that industry, and they can bring their skills into that industry, so it opens it up so we can all work together. That's very important.
This is brilliant. And I think you just help us sum up the entire 30 or so minute conversation so far. I think, you have illustrated so many important benefits of moving to this all digital workflow and its effect on the environment, like all these calls for sustainability rising throughout the fashion industry. Your show really offers a really striking way forward. And I think you are providing that blueprint, which is design, present, and sell your clothes digitally, and no physical materials, no physical space, just our mind's eye to the screen, right? So before we let you go, my friend, I just want to ask you one last question about your decision to align with Mind's charity, to raise awareness, having witnessed the impact of mental health, and losing your uncle, Alexander McQueen, in 2010, and your own journey as well. So tell us more about this charity collaboration.
Yeah, as you mentioned, mental health problems, something that is quite close to my heart. It's something that affected my uncle. It's something that I've had my issues with as well throughout the years. So for me, it's important to support a charity like Mind, where we can reach a good number of people who are suffering in silence. For me, creativity has always given me a way of escapism in one sense. Obviously, as you mentioned, you have to live in the real world, but it's good to have that escapism, and art offers itself as a really nice way of escaping, issues within your life at times, and can inspire. And again, for me, it was important to connect with the younger generation as well, and through doing a digital show, and specifically within alongside a gaming giant like Epic Games and Unreal Engine, I knew that I could connect with the younger generation to educate on mental health issues as well.
This is fantastic. And we have actually overran, but I'm going to just squeeze in the last segment with you, because so far what you're sharing is really insightful. And we would love to maybe squeeze out more answers from you before you go. So it's a rapid fire round, and the rules are just very simple. Just keep your answers short and pithy, maximum 1 or 2 sentences. So are you ready?
Here we go. Let's go.
Let's go. What are your proudest life moments?
My virtual fashion show.
What do you want doing less of in 2021?
Worrying.
What do you want? Yeah. What do you want doing more of in 2021?
God. More creating more things, more stories.
Your advice for fashion designers and NFT artists out there?
Just make your own rules. There are certain guidelines, but the rules are there to be broken. So you'll find a way.
Well said, my friend. Any future ambitions or side projects in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm currently working on mass collaboration, which is again for another charity as well. So I do a lot of charity stuff, and I've just launched a concept for a jewelry piece as well. So and that is again in line with a print house as well. So there's and artworks as well. I'm launching some artworks as well. I've just launched with a Texan gallery, so I'll do lenticular pieces, and they've just gone into that gallery as well. So yeah, the art and design sector is flourishing for me. So
how can people reach you?
Through Instagram mainly. I put a lot of my work up on Instagram because it's so visual. It's a visual social media site for myself. So messages can be sent through that, or info@garyjamesmcqueen.com.
Fantastic. And it's such a privilege to hear your insights, your stories, and sharing us all these innovative and creative things you're doing with technology. So thank you so much once again for joining us today. So to our listeners who are listening to this podcast replay, any last words or message for them?
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking an interest in what I do. I've listened to all my supporters as well since I started my own brand, it was probably about 10 years ago now, almost. I've just had a lot of love and support for what I do, as a storyteller. So I appreciate all that, So please follow me, anybody new to me, and follow my journey on Instagram, yeah.
So to our listeners, to learn more about our special guests, just check out our podcast show notes. We'll include all your Instagram handles and, of course, your website URL as well. So you've been listening to the Metaverse Asia Podcast presented by PodFest Asia. This episode is hosted and produced by me, Wayne Chong. And thank you so much, my friend. I hope, hopefully, we can do this interview next time. Hopefully, in your home country, in real life, when I travel there, for maybe some of your in-person shows in the future. Who knows, right? So hopefully do down interview with you next time in real life. Yeah.
Definitely. Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, maybe for the World Cup next time.
Maybe it's really coming home during the World Cup next year. Definitely we'll see how it pans out. Yeah. You have a nice day, and please take care of yourself. Take care of everyone over there. I'll see you very soon, my friend.
Thanks, Wayne. Bye.
Bye-bye. That's Gary James McQueen, creative director and digital artist. So we'll stick some of the links in the show notes so you could check them out. I think it's really incredible to see all these fruits of his labor come to life on our screens. And, this is probably the longest that I actually share a screen during a show or live taping because they are so visual. And it's actually, a sin if we don't actually play it during the show. So, well, with that, it's almost 11:43 p.m. In Singapore. I'm going to have a break and I'll be back with more guests in the rest of this week. So do stay tuned. And if you want to support us, we do have a Substack page that is up right now. So that's where you can get polished versions, edited versions of this podcast. And do check it out. The URL is right below here. So with that, Wayne Chung, I'm signing off. Goodbye. Good night.